Hello, welcome to The Curiosity Show. Have you ever seen a marathon in real life or on television? Isn't it amazing to watch the contestants running those incredible distances? Have you ever wondered where that term marathon comes from? Well, back in the year 490 BC, there was a war between the Greeks and the Persians at a place called Marathon. In those days, communication was difficult during wartime. The Persians, for example, if they wanted to call out orders in battle, would simply cup their hands and shout as loud as they could. The Greeks had some other aids. They had horns hollowed out from animals, and they'd use those to shout messages. But when it came to the end of the battle, it was very difficult to communicate. In fact, the Greeks won that Battle of Marathon, and a messenger was sent back to the city of Athens, 150 miles or 240 kilometres. He got to the steps of the Acropolis, he gave the message of victory and promptly died. That was the first marathon. Well, these days, a marathon isn't quite so far. It's about 26 miles or 42 kilometres, but it's still a long, gruelling race. I've never been in one, but maybe someday you will.
This looks like a window and a peep sight. In a sense, it's both. But it's a window through which artists saw the world hundreds of years ago. What do you think it is? It's an artist's perspective frame, and through it, artists were able to measure the landscapes they were painting and get all the relationships accurate. Van Gogh used one of these, and so did Dürer, who sketched this one. Same principle, different design. How do they work? Well, really like this. You can see there's a frame there stretched with a whole lot of strings, which gridded up into a pattern of squares 6 by 4. And I've gridded up a piece of paper in the same sort of pattern. Now, when I look at the landscape through that, I can see lines across it. The trouble is, as I move my head, the landscape is moving behind the lines. That's no good. So to keep the head in the constant position, you put on the peep sight and you look through the hole. And that trapped your eye, which meant that every time you looked at that, you're looking in the same place. And you've got a view very much like this. You've got a circle with lines and the landscape beyond. This is a part of our set. Now I can start to translate that to the grid I've got on the piece of paper. So the top of the building was falling just into that square there. The top left-hand corner, well, that's almost up to that line just about there. I see a kite there. Where's that placed? There are two lines crossing just below the centre of the body, just there, so I can sketch the kite in. And in fact, by working like that, I could very quickly fill in all the movement and positions of everything on that, confident that I've got all their perspectives and their placements exactly right. I'd do it, of course, more carefully than this, but when the artists did it, they slowly filled up the painting and hid those lines that they used to guide them. These days, we'd use a camera. It's easy. In those days, they didn't have one. They used this complex geometry. There's a lot of geometry hidden in paintings. A bit later, we'll show you some more.
In a moment, Rob will show you the hidden lines of structure of a very famous dinner. And I will introduce you to the ultimate in energy-efficient sound systems.
Sounds absurd, but in fact there is a way. When you go to an art gallery, people talk about the composition of the paintings, or they talk about the composition of a photograph. What do they mean? Just that things are placed to be more agreeable to the eye than they might otherwise be. What does that mean? Well, the cameraman who's filming me here isn't really happy with the shot. It's pretty boring. I'm just dead center. So he's moving the camera to make the picture a bit more interesting. Notice what's happening? He's not got me dead center anymore. I'm about a third of the way in. So is the question mark. And the division of that painting, formed by the grid and the green here, is about a third of the way up. The rule of thirds places things more interestingly if you're taking a photograph than just setting somebody right up in the middle of the rectangle. Well, for hundreds of years, artists have been interested in the geometry of form and using it in composing their pictures. For example, you've probably seen this picture by Leonardo da Vinci. He was fascinated by the form of the human body, and in this, he's relating it to the geometry of both the square and the circle. Now, he was responsible for a very famous painting, one of the most famous of all. It's the Mona Lisa. And no one's quite sure what she's smiling at. It's a very mysterious smile. Perhaps she knew what Leonardo had done with the background. If you see several copies of this side by side, you can see that the background is continuous. The hills and the roads and the rocks all blend from one painting to another. Perhaps that's the secret of the smile. But Leonardo did more than that. He used very geometrical constructions in setting out many of his paintings. For example, this famous fresco of the Last Supper was painted on a church wall. At first sight, you wouldn't see the geometry that underlines it. Let's do a few things with it. Let's take a diagonal from one corner to another. Notice what it does along the line of the windows. It defines where they are. A diagonal from the other side does the same thing. They intersect right on the main focus of the picture, Christ's head. We'll split the painting into two, and we can see the way he's arranged the apostles on either side of Christ. There are 6 on each side, but look what happens when we put the intersections in. The first side goes there, and the second side goes there. And you'll see that those intersections split the apostles into 4 groups of 3, very carefully placed. Where are their heads? Well, a horizontal line through all the intersections shows all the heads along it. And another line, halfway down, runs through the food on the table. We could go on and on. In fact, we could cover the painting with lines and show the construction. And it really is based on a grid as complex as that. Well, that's a painting some hundreds of years old, but more recent paintings, of course, use the same geometrical construction. And this one is a very famous one by Renoir. It's just been doing the rounds of the country, and thousands of people have been to see it. It's the Luncheon of the Voting Party. It's based on a rectangle which is really overlapping squares, and a square on the right-hand side runs down through the pole of the canvas awning. The square from the left-hand side splits an area of dark off on the right-hand side of the painting. A line down the middle runs through another pole of the awning. Let's put the diagonals in. You start to see, underneath them, the centre of attention of the party, the table of food and drink. And indeed, 2 more parallel lines isolate the bottles of wine and all the good things to eat. And notice that the placement of the people around there is embraced by an ellipse that runs through the arm and up round the curve of the back on the right-hand side. Well, we could go on with that painting too, but you get the idea. A great deal of geometrical construction underlying its composition. The next time you're in an art gallery, have a close look at the paintings. You'll probably find the same sort of thing there if you look carefully enough, and that's a lot to do with composition. And to give you a bit of practice, here are a few.
Every time you hear sounds, something is vibrating. Right now, my vocal cords are vibrating, causing the air to vibrate, in turn making something inside the microphone vibrate, and at your end, the loudspeaker in the television set is vibrating, causing the air in your room to vibrate, which causes the eardrums in your ears to vibrate, and you hear my voice. Okay, let's create some vibrations of a different sort. I have here a wooden skewer. If I flick the end, we should make it vibrate. Maybe you'll hear something. Listen carefully. Did you hear anything? Not much. The trouble is, there wasn't very much air vibrating. However, if we take that same wooden skewer and press it against a matchbox, empty matchbox, listen this time. Easier to hear because now the matchbox is vibrating as well. If I hold the same wooden skewer against a piece of cardboard, the vibration is much easier to hear. And if I put it over the edge of the table, that vibration is almost becoming a musical note because now the whole surface of the table is vibrating just a little bit. Let's try a coffee stirring stick. And another musical note. plastic ruler, metal ruler, and a steel saw. And we create a whole lot of musical notes, each time partially because those things were vibrating and partially because we were causing the whole table to vibrate. Keep that in mind as we look at an ancient record player. Now, you've seen record players today, haven't you, with electric motors and all sorts of fancy electronic gadgetry to amplify the sound. This one had none of that. It was made about 30 years ago, and if you open it up, it looks as if nothing's there. They forgot to put the works inside. That's where you place the record, and the record looks fairly normal. It looks like a 45 record. In fact, it's a 78. You have to rotate it at 78. It sits on the turntable there. No motor to switch on. You need to use a wooden skewer or a pencil, put it in that little hole there, and try and turn it at 78 revolutions per minute, like so. You might say, where's the needle? Well, if you turn over the cardboard lid, you find a tiny little needle poking down there. And it's that will pick up the vibrations in the wavy line within the record. Now, the front of this booklet thing is a sheet of cardboard, and that's vitally important. If it weren't for that, you wouldn't hear anything. But when the needle vibrates in the groove, it'll cause the whole of this to vibrate, and if you listen very carefully, you may be able to hear a sound. You may be able to work out what nursery rhyme it is. Have a listen. I'll put the needle in the groove, and then the skewer in place, hold it down, and try and rotate it around about 78 revs per minute. Here we go.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a darling in the sky. Where the blazing sun has gone, where the nothing shines upon, then you show your little light. Twinkle, twinkle, all the night.
Right, and in case you didn't realise, it was Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Well, this was developed about 30 years ago as a child's toy, but they're still being used in many countries of the world by missionaries where they don't have electricity, and they find that they're able to use these to communicate words and music to people who otherwise would be without that form of sound.
Who painted this self-portrait? He's one of the most famous painters in modern art. Yet during his lifetime received no recognition and sold only one painting. The intense colour and slashing brushstrokes of many of his later paintings reflected his disturbed mind. In fact, during a seizure in 1888, he cut off one of his own ears. He committed suicide in 1890. His deep religious feelings and his great desire for love and respect were strong influences affecting his life and work. He was Vincent van Gogh. Next, Dean will show you how to make food for a flame, and I'll show you how to find the most unusual sweet food of the bush. So stay with us.
You know, there are many important things in the world which we take for granted. None more so than the gases in the air which surrounds us. Do you know what the name of that very important gas is in the air that we all need to live and survive? You're right, it's oxygen. Fortunately for us, all of the green plants in the world give out oxygen. We breathe it in, and it allows us to continue living. You might say, hey, this sounds a bit one-sided. What do we do for the plants? Well, every time we breathe out, not only us, not only people, but also all animals, we breathe out a gas called carbon dioxide. Guess what? Plants need carbon dioxide to live and survive. So there's a cycle. They help us, we help them. Well, both of these, oxygen and carbon dioxide, are invisible gases. We can't see them, but we can make them, and we can look at some of the things that they do, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. Here's how you make carbon dioxide. You simply take a bottle of mineral salts, and you get that ready with some cold water. Maybe you do this every morning, or maybe you do it when you're feeling a bit sick. And you mix up the mineral salts with the water, and before very long you have lots and lots of bubbles forming. Well, can you guess what those bubbles are? From what I've said before, you probably know already that those bubbles are bubbles of carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide is interesting stuff, because if you take a flame, and I have here a piece of wood that's burning, if I plunge that into the carbon dioxide, the invisible gas there, look at that, flame goes out. In fact, this stuff, carbon dioxide, is very good as a fire extinguisher, and many of the fire extinguishers which we use in buildings and homes today produce that gas, carbon dioxide. What about the other one, oxygen? How do we make that? I'm glad you asked. We can use two chemicals which you might find in the medicine cabinet or in the bathroom cabinet at home. One of them is hydrogen peroxide, which is used as a disinfectant sometimes, and it's also used as a bleach. If you're going to do this at home, make sure you have an adult there to supervise. Okay, I pour a bit of hydrogen peroxide in a glass, and I add to that something else which you may find in the medicine cabinet. Potassium permanganate, also a very good disinfectant. Sometimes it's called Condy's crystals. Sometimes it's said to be very useful for treating snake bite and other wounds. Now, I'll take a small amount of Condy's crystals or potassium permanganate on the end of that wooden stick, and I'll drop that into the hydrogen peroxide and get ready for what you're about to see. Lots and lots of bubbles. Now, once again, I'll take a burning flame, end of a piece of wood, and plunge that into it. You can see it doesn't go out, but it seems to get brighter. In fact, if I shake the flame out and put the glowing piece of wood in there, it bursts back into flame. And it'll do this repeatedly, because that gas, oxygen, is not only allowing a flame to keep burning, but in fact it's essential for burning to occur. Well, who discovered oxygen? A man called Joseph Priestley, an English minister, 200 years ago, discovered it, but he didn't realise how important it was. A few years later, a French chemist by the name of Antoine Lavoisier, working with his wife in Paris, gave oxygen its name and showed how vitally important it was for burning. Well, I would suggest that next time you take a deep breath, you spare a thought for Lavoisier, for oxygen, and also for all the green plants in the world that make it for us.
The Australian landscape can be pretty barren, but out there, if you know where to look, is a lot of food, and the Aborigines were able to find it. There were kangaroos that gave them meat. There were things like witchetty grubs, good source of protein. There was a lot of vegetable matter, and if you were lucky, you found fruits in season, or things like beehives that would give you honey, or honey ants that would provide you with something sweet. Because, as you probably know, if you've been without something sweet for a long time, you rather want it. But up in these gum trees around was another source of sweetness, and it was made by an insect. Let me show you what I mean. Have a look at these leaves closely, and you'll see sitting on them are funny little white furry scales. I'll pull a leaf off, and we'll have a look at that more closely. Here we go. That's the white scale there, and if I just tease it up a bit, you might be able to see the animal that made it. There we go, tiny little yellow thing there. It's actually a form of bug, and bugs get their meals by and large by putting a little injection tube into the leaf, and instead of pushing things in, they take sap out. So this little creature's been sucking sap from the gum tree for ages, and it can't use everything that it gets. It has to push it out as a sort of excretion. And the excretion contains wax, which the leaf is coated with, and sap products. And that's what they are. They're this white scale, the lerp scale.
Now that is full of wax and sugar, and it tastes like sweet wax. Now, picking them off the leaves one by one like that would be a painstaking business. But these things in time fall off the tree, especially with a bit of wind and rain, and they're often lying underneath the tree like snow. And collecting them like that is no problem at all. You can end up with a handful. And they were eaten just as was, or they were ground up in water to make a sweet drink, and that could be drunk. Well, those scales also repay interest of another kind. Let's haul some more off and see what I mean. Now, if you examine this scale carefully, you'll see that it's got distinctive patterns in it. This one's sort of rough and hairy, and it's from those patterns that scientists can identify the lerp that made it, and there are dozens of different kinds. These things make rather a mess of the tree. You can see they've chewed up the leaf quite a bit, and they're the despair of many gardeners. But if you examine those scales under a microscope or a magnifying glass, you'll see they really are things of considerable beauty.
Dean, the great thing about cards is it can really improve your ability at mental arithmetic.
Really?
My mind can beat your calculator.
Show me.
Okay, we'll have to count ace as 1. Fair enough?
Okay.
So I'll put 6 cards down here. We might even consider that makes a number. We'll see what happens.
6-digit number.
Yeah, 142,857.
142,857.
Well, there are 6 cards for me.
Yes.
I'll give you 6. In fact, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, what I want you to do is to shuffle them to show there's no cheating. Come up with one of those numbers and multiply this red number by your black one. And we'll do it at the same time. You use your calculator. I'll just do it mentally.
Okay,
and I'll bet you
I'm shuffling them, and I've come up with number 4.
Okay.
Now, I have a calculator watch, so all I need to do is to tap in that number, which I think was 142,857.
I finished long ago.
Now, you couldn't have possibly. All I need to do with the calculator is to multiply that by 4 and then press the equal sign, and look at this. I get 571,428. What did you get?
571,428.
How did you do it so rapidly?
Oh, well, it's not hard. I'll give you another contest, okay?
All right, I won't use 4 this time. I'll pick another one.
142,857. That was the number.
Right, I'll make it difficult for you.
All
I'll
right.
pick a 6 this time.
Okay.
I know that's the largest of
You
those
go,
numbers.
and I'll go.
Okay, well, I tap in the first number again.
Well, I've finished.
You couldn't have. 142,857. Multiply by 6 equals...
857,142.
That is incredible.
Have a look. I beat you.
How did you do it?
Well, there's a very simple solution to this, and I'll show you in a tick.
Rob, I'm amazed. Your mental arithmetic is faster than my calculator. Why?
I'm afraid only with that particular number. Take a good note of it. 142,857. Write it down. It's a magical number. You can do good things with it. See, when you multiply that with any number from 1 to 6, the new answer has all those digits
in the same order, but they just start and end in a different place. Let me show you what I mean. Let's see what the next card is.
The next card is 2.
Okay, well, 2 times that number, well, who knows? But 2 times the last one, 2 sevens are 14. I know the new number will end in 4. All I have to do is to move those like that, the same order, and the new number ends in 4. And that's the new answer, 285714. Check it with the calculator.
All right, well, I have the original number there. I'll simply multiply that by 2, press the equal sign, and I get 285,714.
So that's it. That's the answer. 142857. Muck around with it. That's all we have time for.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Curiosity. Curiosity. Curiosity.